We are cutting over with audio, and hey, we are live. And
Man, two hamsters, one wheel is so adorable. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Stop it, stop it. You ruined my groove. I'm trying to get the groove going. I'm trying
There
to
is
get
no groove.
the T-Force LCS Rundown Week 8 of the Summer Split 2014 off and rolling. And of course, we are off and rolling live tonight. This is Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we are on twitch.tv/T-Force Podcast. My name, god damn it, is Motkanorum. Repping some T-Force swag tonight. The special edition at Motkanorum T-Force Podcast shirt. And I am joined this week by a very dapper crew. This week joined by Optimus Tom,
who does not have his very own awesome T-Force LCS Rundown shirt. Aponophobia.
Cereal Box.
I'm pretty sure yours is the only one in the store, isn't it?
It
so
is.
Everyone can wear the Mockanorum shirt if they're really feeling I don't even know.
We have our regular shirt.
Emulating you.
We have our regular shirt just without the at Motkanorum on it.
I'll just write it on with whiteout.
There you go. And Greg Credible Mushroom Russo.
Hello, everybody, and I'm glad you have the help getting Twitter followers, Tom.
Yeah. I think I other than Optimus Tom, because you can't beat him, I think I have the most out of anybody.
I'm checking right
Do you?
now. This is important. No, wait, I'm pretty sure Greg has a lot from his
Oh,
other
no,
podcast.
that's true. I've never checked you. That's fine. And to be fair,
He's just trying to beat me.
I didn't convert the Instalock Mid podcast Twitter profile. I made a new one just for the show. So that should be taken into consideration. Other things to take into consideration this week, we are, of course, on iTunes and Stitcher. You can go ahead and subscribe if you're out there in podcast land, and go ahead and please leave us a review. I think last time I checked, which was earlier this week, we're at a 4.5, which is great. So thanks for sending in those good reviews. We certainly love to read them. And we also equally like to see, the less than favorable feedback. And that's at feedback@trinityforcepodcast.com. So any thoughts, feelings about the show, anything you think we could improve on, go ahead and send that in. We do read it. We do actually take it into consideration for the lovely mess that we call a show every week. So we absolutely love that. Speaking of love, we also love our other shows. Trinity Force Podcast Mondays and Wednesdays, Oz LOL Podcast on Thursdays. Who wants to talk about our good friends at Gatherers this week? I did it last week. Boom. On screen. If you're on the podcast land, that slight plastic ruffling was Gatherers Granola hitting your screen at just an amazing speed.
Literally just being thrown at the screen.
You can go ahead and get some of that delicious granola and support the show at the same time at bit.ly, that's bit.ly/tforcegranola. Really great stuff. We talked about it in past episodes. Great flavors, great nutrition, and from a great company who loves to support our show. So
More importantly, if you use that bit.ly link and use the code TForceGG in all caps, you get 10% off your order.
Oh, that's true. I forgot to mention that. See, this is why we do this. This is why we're a team.
This is why the two Toms talk about the granola.
There we go. And then we don't have Dan this week, which is disappointing. We were supposed to be the 5-sided T-Force, which just doesn't even make sense.
We were going to be a full item support with open slots for pink wards.
There you go.
Oh,
Look
baby.
at that. Look at that. That was almost us. Maybe next week. We'll see.
By the way, fun fact, I have Mott's Twitter page up, and my Skype window is exactly where Brahms' face should be. So it looks like you have Brahms' body. It's very fun.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, get some.
Supports.
Speaking of get some, let's get straight into... Like these transitions, we're flowing.
No.
today.
Yeah, I'm helping you out.
We are like the ocean.
We are. Let's get right into actually some news this week, which is pretty exciting. Let's open up with an article. It's been all over the place, really. It's been on Reddit. It's been several news outlets, but I'm pulling it specifically off PC Gamer right now. We're going to talk about Riot's potential plans for increasing the amount of teams to a 10-team structure in 2015 for the LCS. This is very interesting to me. I'm not sure on my thoughts. At first, I was really excited. I thought to myself, wow, that would be great. 2 more teams in the LCS. That's amazing. And then I thought about the last time a really good team got kicked out of the LCS and not just somebody who was sitting at the bottom. And I thought to myself, what are 2 more teams really going to do for us?
It's going to make sure that NIP never gets back into the LCS.
I heard no super weeks somewhere in there, so I'm all for that.
Was that
I think those are some of the options that they're considering.
It does say here in the article that in the new system, there'd be a lot more of a flexible schedule. There'd be longer playoffs, which is cool. And that any team participating in those playoffs would be free from the threat of relegation. I don't know. I mean, overall, I kind of feel like bringing on 2 more teams isn't going to make it any more competitive. It is going to make those relegation spots a lot more competitive, but, I mean, am I wrong here in thinking that the challenger scene, as it currently stands today, really hasn't brought us a competitive enough nature where the ability to have 2 more of those teams come in, because in theory that's how that would work, I don't really see that as being a huge benefit to the competitive edge and getting those top teams shifted up a bit.
I will say this. I'll say that's the wrong lens to look at it. Because whether the teams come in, whether they don't come in, even if they were amazing teams, it's not going to affect the overall competitive edge. I mean, what even is that? You know, are we talking like compared to Korea? I think we're going to need a lot more help than 2 challenger teams to get up to that level. I think what you want to look at it is from a business/marketing type thing. Does this make the league a little more accessible? Does it make it more entertaining? Because you've got more people to follow. You've got more potential matchups. You're not seeing the same teams head-to-head every other week or so. What is the value of that? And I think the value is actually pretty good, especially if it can take out those super weeks and like spread out the load a bit more evenly throughout the splits and make it a bit clearer which teams are in relegation, which teams are in the playoffs. Maybe some kind of redesign with the split system there would make the spring and summer splits a little more competitive inherently. That would also be good, but I think adding more teams is a step in the right direction as long as they don't go overboard. I think 2 in the what would be the 4th year is probably pretty reasonable.
3rd year?
3rd? Yeah.
It's only the 2nd year of it.
Right. Oh, that's right. Because
technically,
I want to.
Yeah.
I really want to know what they're considering. But my favorite part of this is a possible change in the playoff system, because they say it could. They're considering 3 weeks of playoffs with all those teams. They're saying are going to be safe from relegation. And personally, I don't like the one and done kind of format that goes on in this and kind of happened in bracket stages for, let's say, Worlds last year. I really like what like the fighting game community does. They always have winners losers brackets, which you can see right now for Evo is going on.
I was wondering how you were going to.
Yeah, I was going to somehow segue that. But the amount of hype that comes out of those is incredible. Just because you even if a team loses early. Like if you'd added a losers bracket to Worlds last year, C9 wouldn't have been out so quickly after just 1 series. You could see a lot more teams make it all the way back up, and it could create, I think, a much better playoff system. And I don't know what they're gonna try. You say 3 weeks of playoffs, right? They didn't explain that at all. Right now, they just have the 1 weekend, pretty much like 6 total sets, and that's it. So.
Right.
3 weeks of playoffs could be awesome. We have no idea. We can only speculate on what that would actually mean. If it's like the top 6 teams go into a pool play and then do a bracket, I don't know. We'd have to see that.
I don't necessarily want to get anybody's hopes up, but I'm reading kind of a little bit between the lines in here. And Nick Allen, Mr. Esports over at Riot, says that there's going to be a consistent schedule, no super weeks, more diversity in player and team matchups, which I think is all fantastic stuff for the LCS. The big thing I'm focusing on, one like Mitch said here, or Serial Box said, is the playoff optimization. And when I think about that, and I think about who's saying it, I'm thinking this is Nick Allen, the guy who helped head IPL 4 and 5, who were
Yes.
giant group stage, double elimination bracket stage tournaments that did happen over a short period of time and was a lot of overload. Whereas stretching however many weeks they say, and they have 3 weeks of playoffs in this situation could potentially be great, because you could wind up having a group stage, a beginning of bracket stage, and then finishing up a losers winners on the third weekend after that, which would be fantastic and put at a very good pace and give you better games in those circumstances, because teams would actually have preparation time on top of having all those multiple matches. Another thing that I'm really excited for when you say playoff optimization, where do the North American playoffs take place?
LA, right?
No. The North American playoffs, this split, take place at PAX.
Oh.
Or they've had it in the past.
They did last summer split.
I
So-
didn't hear that they announced that yet, but I guess you could equally as just
the
assume.
timing works
Yeah,
out.
you just assume that it's going to work out. It's the same exact time schedule as where PAX falls. So the excitement for playoff optimization is potentially excitement for road shows, which I thought would be really cool. That's what the first thing that popped into my head when I read that was, I hope these playoffs go places. But
And I think that's huge for just the viewership of the sport. I mean, it's really easy to put in really good production quality and make it really available and hope that people watch it for that reason. But I think you get a lot more excitement. You make a lot more money selling tickets and taking it to a place like, let's say, New York or Boston or Houston, or spread it out a little bit. I'd love to see a PAX East event. That would be great. They did the college matches, and they did the Curse team coming by last year at PAX East. Not this year, but the last year. I'd love to see more of that stuff come out on the road.
All right,
But
well,
I don't
we're killing that one.
All
a
in
little
all,
bit.
though-
Yeah,
we
I
don't know
s-
anything yet.
For sure.
all
But
in all, though,
I-
I gotta say that the system when it comes to Challenger, because the end of the article mentions, I hope this doesn't really kill the Challenger series. And I think this is kind of moving more into a direction where a lot of us on the podcast kind of agreed when we used to bring up what the Challenger series should do.
Yeah.
2 additional teams may not add top tier competition to North America and Europe, but what it does do is it gives you 10 teams, 10 potentially stable organizations, less teams or still plenty of teams in the Challenger series that could qualify for Coke League. But now those top 10 teams, where however many in the playoffs are secured that spot, if they're looking for talent to replace somebody on their roster, if they're looking for talent to maybe buffer their roster and go forward into the future, maybe they have a senior player. Like maybe they have somebody that's thinking about retiring after that year. They have more of an option to pull from a pool of Challenger talent because there's more spots available in the LCS. And I still think it's going to be great for the Challenger circuit because Challenger teams already have been, there's been players that have been very vocal at the fact that, hey, so-and-so's team gave me an offer, but I don't want to play for the 7th place team. We can knock them out. I believe that happened last split with one of the NA teams, where they're just like, well, we're just going to stick on our team instead of split up because we think we have a better chance as a team. I think it was Complexity that wound up saying that. And look where they are now.
Right. And I think, we have beaten it to death, but I think we will see a decision on this topic at least soon, or something released.
I
think
doubt
if
it.
I
We
think
have a
if
long
it's,
time till the next spring split.
but I think if it's slated for 2015, you have some pretty big life announcements for for 2 teams where you got to say, hey, by the way, you're not going to be playing potentially in the Challenger Series. You're going to be in the LCS, and you better be ready for that. See you in a couple months, guys. It really will be coming down to the wire for 2015. If this is the kind of article and the kind of speculation we're getting, I doubt it.
You'll find out about it most likely by the time the promotion tournament happens again.
And there you
Which is in December, or at
Something
least it
around
was
that.
last time.
Sure.
So we'll see.
Yep. So moving on to some more news before we hop into the individual leagues here. Copenhagen Wolves making some moves.
I'm so sad. I'm
Cow-
so sad.
Let's see. So the Copenhagen Wolves are going to be replacing Airwalks and Cowtard or Coward if
It
you
does-
are
Oh.
Ponophobia.
You got to
That's
kind of
nice.
have a little asterisk there. The article says they're replacing Airwax for week 9, and that Cowtard is being replaced indefinitely.
Okay. So tell me about Broken Shard, and I'm not even going to pronounce this guy. Soren.
Soren.
Do you put the XD on the end though?
Yeah, like super hot.
You just smile.
XP.
You smile and blink when you say it.
Soren. I want to see every caster do that now every time. Tell me about these guys. What impact are we going to see on Copenhagen Wolves? Good move, bad move.
They might be able to kill some wolves this time.
Ayo.
Didn't Broken Shard die to the wolves a long while back
Yeah.
in the LCS?
The team or the jungle?
No,
camp?
the jungle camp.
Oh god.
I'm pretty sure that's the verb pulling the Broken Shard. So
Used to be pulling a Dyrus when his Gangplank died at IPL 3.
So I honestly don't know much about Soren at all. Tom, you said he was a challenger player in EU.
He's, I believe, a Danish mid laner, which
That'll work for Copenhagen Wolves.
every single mid laner from Daneland has been successful. You look at it, there's Bjergsen, there's Froggen, there's so many Danish mid laners, it's insane.
Yeah.
The thing I'm most sad about is Cowtard not going to be playing every week. Now, Cowtard, he was the ruiner of many people's fantasy weeks when he would go 0-10 in one game and then 0-10-20 when he played Lulu and completely mess people's fantasy weeks up. But the thing I will miss the most about Cowtard is, little known fact, every single game the Copenhagen Wolves play, they play warm-up 1v1s against each other before the game starts. Cowtard and Unlimited have a rivalry going where they play 1v1 Lee Sin before every match starts. And then once the game is over, they go into the lobby so triumphantly and let everybody in the lobby know that they, for that day, are the best Lee Sin on Copenhagen Wolves. And it was Cowtard for so long. But this last week, Unlimited beat him. I guess that's why he's retiring or stepping down.
Probably.
The burns.
So
And speaking of retiring, if retirement's the right word we want to put on this, Gambit also making some roster moves.
well,
Ugh.
they played this week, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. And I mean, no, Gambit did
they
play this
were-
week. I don't know if they really showed up.
They were
But-
in the games. I don't know.
Participants trophies.
I believe they loaded.
we could use this as a giant segue again if we would like.
We will segue. Let's hop right into the games then. So Gambit's got some pretty consistent play coming in to this week. Pretty consistently terrible. I mean, at this point, they're 5-15 on the week. They're just as good as EG.
That's a claim to fame.
That bothers me. CLG EU and fucking Moscow 5. What the fuck happened to League of Legends?
They don't have
That's
their
those
good
players.
players anymore.
To be
Everything
fair, there's
they
not
do.
much of CLGEU left on CLGEU.
Still, it's the spirit of it, guys. I want to fall in love with the team, not players.
If you want the spirit of CLG EU, just look at first place in Europe.
Very true.
If
But
you want to fall in love with players,
Well,
not
kind of
teams,
first place.
then you need teams that have more stable organization. Because
Like Dignitas. They're never going anywhere.
sure. But so, taking a look at Gambit, Darian and Diamond Prox benched, 2 new guys in. I mean, at this point, Gambit has nothing else but to set their sights on relegation and trying to get out of that. Do you think making the switch at this point with a total of how many games left will they have to play before they hit that relegation? They have
8.
2
8.
games. Yeah, 2 and 6 next?
It's 8
No.
more games,
8 more
It's-
games?
2-2 Super Week.
2-2 Super Week. Okay.
which is 8 games.
8 games. So they've got 8 games. Do you think that's going to be enough for them to at least be able to perform against their challenger team matchups? Like enough time to really get synergy in? Or is this a move that you would want to make towards the end of the actual split itself after you've gone through the relegation and move in?
I think it's a good thing. I think it's better than if they try to do it 6 games out or 4 games out. I think it's probably the right move if they were already kind of sold on getting rid of Darian and Diamond. So why not start moving on now? It's not like they're doing. It's not like with them they've been doing well, and they're not going to just bump up the standings at all with their stalwart old players. But I think it's a good move if they were already set on it, and moving forward, maybe they'll mesh really well with Kuban and Lulex, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. But
No, you're right. It's Lulex. It's not Lolex. It's Lulex.
oh yeah, he's French, isn't he? Yeah.
Something like that.
Lulu.
Yeah, he is. So I don't know. They're pretty well stuck down there, though. They're definitely getting relegated. They're actually 5. They need to jump up 5 wins in the standings just to get even with 5th place. So,
and that's if everybody else loses.
this is everyone just loses constantly.
Right.
So they're pretty screwed.
Right. I mean, it's sad to see that Gambit is in the kind of position that they're in, and it's sad to see legends like Darren and Diamond Prox go away. I haven't found anything overly compelling showing what they plan to do in their League of Legends careers, whether or not they're going to try to get onto another team or just retire or become a part of the Gambit Gaming, coaching staff or whatever. Anybody seen anything particularly good on that note?
I'm afraid for Darian because I feel like Diamond has almost every opportunity in the world because he speaks pretty good English and has a very known player personality, whereas Darian is known as the guy who speaks very little English and wears red sweatpants.
What a legacy.
I mean, Diamond has openly said that while he wants to still play for Gambit, he's considering serious offers from other teams, be it LCS or Challenger teams, as long as they're serious offers and he feels like he can succeed. There's plenty of Challenger teams in the Coke League still that might want to take a veteran player, at least for the shot calling. We've seen Gambit's downfall has been poor communication or has been people not being on the same page. They took Diamond Prox out of the equation, and if you guys saw before, Gambit's analyst was doing an AMA on Reddit, and he said a lot of the shot calling now winds up falling to Nick. And Nick is a brand new player in that role. He came on just this season himself. So it's basically a brand new team you're dealing with, minus Genja and Edward, where Genja can't understand what everybody's saying and Edward has to translate for him. Diamond Prox had calls that Gambit just weren't able to follow up on, as opposed to now there's no calls and Gambit is just trying to perform better as individual players. So while I feel like Diamond could bring something to another team, Darian has gone on record as being the top laner that dies a bunch and wears red sweatpants.
What do you think the chances are of, and this is totally like hype speculation, but what do you think the chances are that Diamond goes and joins Alexish?
Absolutely zero, because they have Ku and he's the best jungler in Europe.
Shut down. So it's sad to see Gambit. I'm really interested to see what they manage to do in relegations. At this point, I almost say let the ship sink and bring in some new blood. We didn't get to see that last split, so hopefully the spring will deliver some fresh flowers to be hemmed. Speaking of hemming, Alliance just sucking recently. Currently sitting at the top at 14-6, but they're on like a 4-game
losing streak.
4-game losing streak, coming off their solid performance in the beginning of Super Week, but ending off just terribly, and now losing to who is it? It was Rockcat and
Millennium.
And Millennium, of all teams, one of the bottom tier. If you want to split them up that way, in EU it's kind of hard. But what's going on with Alliance?
I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week, and the fact that they kind of maybe got overconfident after their victory over SK. That was that massive stomp, and then ended up dropping the second 2 games. And this week was kind of interesting. They lost both games in incredibly long matches, 53 and 55 minutes, I think.
I think you can't say incredibly long after this week in their 80-minute match.
Okay, yeah. So in comparison,
relatively long.
Yeah, relatively long. And I don't really know what really happened, because the first game they were up 8-ton. They were playing against Millennium. They were up. They'd gotten like 5 dragons. Were just crushing on everything that mattered. But then suddenly, I think Millennium had teleports on both their top laner and their mid laner in Aatrox and Fizz, and were able to get 2 Barons, start winning a lot of team fights, and just kind of coasted to victory after a while.
The big turning point in that was Alliance took a lot of dragons in the mid game, around it was like 26-ish minutes, like whenever like the third or fourth dragon was in that game. Millennium tried to steal it and they fail, and Alliance just kind of backs away. So Alliance kind of backs away and tries to position themselves more towards mid lane and go for a push. Millennium winds up catching somebody out with I believe it was Blitzcrank hook in this game.
Yeah, they had Blitz for that one.
Which is fantastic because Jerry is an amazing Blitzcrank. They catch somebody out in mid lane with a Blitzcrank hook, which frees Kevin up to dive on the back line as Aatrox and completely zones out the damage of Alliance. Then Millennium kind of collapse in on this one, and they wind up obliterating them and taking all the towers in the mid lane off of like one consecutive giant momentum swing, which was like incredible. It was the Blitzcrank factor. That's what that champion does. He hooks one person, puts them in a terrible position, even more so when you get hooked by Thresh, because he completely displaces them instead of kind of rooting them and slightly moving them a little bit. So the complete displacement factor is as soon as you hook one of those key targets and melt them, you're in a 4v5 situation. And Alliance was not that far ahead. And the previous Dragon fight, or not even Dragon fight, the previous Dragon Steel showed that they weren't ready to fight yet. So Millennium completely pounced on that. Millennium and their pick compositions and their we're going to wind up killing one of you and then taking things because you can't fight us anymore compositions really started to shine just at that point. And Alliance, they didn't really look to kind of recover from that point. There was a lot of Dragons and Baron pressure going down, but it was always Millennium pick somebody off. Most of the time it was Nif and Shook who they just died so much. The previous week in the game against Copenhagen Wolves, they had a combined 11 deaths for Alliance. Those two supporting cast members, if they are out of position, if they get killed, Alliance doesn't perform.
And they've been getting caught a lot because that was a big factor. Obviously, Blitzcrank wants to do that. That's the entire point of Blitzcrank is to catch somebody really easily. Mm-hmm. And then the same thing happened in the Rocket game too. They had a Vi and Braum combo who would just lock somebody down really, really quickly. And once they got that first kill, once Rock got the first kill onto Alliance, they just kept snowballing all the advantages. And I think you'd be proud. Rocket picked up 2 early dragons. I didn't know they could do that.
I was so proud. Like, Rocket finally contested for dragons. And this is something we'll touch upon later in NA too when we talk about Curse, because we're going to have to talk about Curse this week. But dragons are so much more important now that the patches have changed basically how much they're worth. So you don't see lane swaps anymore. You see people going to fight for the dragon because if you trade 2 people and get the dragon, it's still completely worth it for you, even at the early stages in the game. So Rocket was able to secure those objectives. They controlled the lanes. Jankos was a master at the jungle in that game. He was everywhere he needed to be, and he was running circles around Shook. Alliance, they did show one thing, which is why I think they're still going to be a team that you have to say looks like they're bound for Worlds, especially when it comes to playoffs. They recovered themselves in that game, and even though they were behind, they put up a fight against Rocket, which is going to be extremely crucial in a best-of-3 series kind of situation for playoffs. They came back, and they fought at Baron when they were behind.
Oh, yeah.
And they destroyed Rocket. The first time they caught Jankos out and backed away. The second time they cornered Rocket in the pit, took Baron from them, and took a 5-for-2 ace or something like that. So they came back and they had the moves to get done. But still, the factor of Shook and Nif, when they're not on the same page, when they're not the rest of the team, Nif got caught out for the last fight of the game. It went so long, I thought I was watching the International because people recalled and teleported back into that fight. It was prolonged for so long. But the fact of the matter was, Alliance was fighting that fight 4v5 again because Nif was out of position.
Yeah, and they had a team comp that was kind of... It was based around team fights, so I thought was going to be better for late game because they had like a Yasuo Nami. Well, that combo is already really, really good. You can get the right knockups. And then they had Siobhan and Lee Sin to help that as well. But they just had Nif get caught, and suddenly you're missing on the huge engage that kind of ruined the game for him. So they got back in it, and that's a sign of a really great team, is that they can get back into the game, turn it back around when they've kind of they were down the whole game until that Baron fight you were talking about. And unfortunately, they don't pick up the win, but they are still going to be a force to be reckoned with, and are still the top of the table despite losing 4 games straight, and Fnatic winning 6 games straight. So
actually, and that's a perfect note to move on from. I want to temporarily side pocket Rocket because coming up 5 wins on a 5-win streak right at this point. There's something to be said there, but right now I want to talk Fnatic, and Alliance. So
Fnatic, baby.
Fnatic in regular Fnatic style, coming up really strong towards the end, and looking like they may just be able to take the split, which they've taken, the last 3?
All of them?
All of them.
Which are 3, but all of them.
They've taken all of them. So this is looking like regular Fnatic form. But what worries me, and what also gets me somewhat excited about Alliance, is that Fnatic's international performance has been overall pretty shitty. So
They got 3rd, 4th place at Worlds last year.
Yeah,
they were
but-
the only non-Asian team to reach semifinals.
When there's
Okay.
3 regions coming out of Asia out of 5.
okay, but
still,
their
yeah.
their all-star performance was pretty bad. Then they came into the beginning
Yeah.
of this split still looking pretty bad. And they're only really getting into a solid groove now when Rocket kind of took a dip in the middle there. Alliance starts now starting to really suck, and they had a great Super Week. So a lot of their success has been kind of right here in the moment. As soon as they hit that international stage, who do you think is going to be in the better position to represent Europe? Even though both teams may end up going, who do you think is going to do better for Europe as sort of a region, Alliance or Fnatic?
We haven't seen Alliance on an international stage, have we?
Nope.
Oh,
They have.
No,
they
but-
have. I'm just saying, we don't have any sort of history to go for there.
I mean,
besides the fact that a
Battle
number
of
of
the
them did
Atlantic,
play.
technically, but that
Yeah.
doesn't really count.
I mean, we
Yeah.
kind of have Froggen and Wicked's individual performances,
From
and then we
CSW.
also have the Lemon Dogs, which was Tabs.
Yeah.
But that's about it. Oh, we have Nif. He was on SK. So they've individually had international experience besides Shook, but they haven't competed as a team. And it's such a difficult question because I feel like while Alliance might be the better team, it's so much harder for people in Europe alone, let alone across the world, to prepare for what Fnatic is going to do. They always have that Fnatic factor, whether it's a top lane Ziggs from Soaz, whether it's a constant spam off jungle Aatrox all of a sudden from Cyanide when he hadn't played that for the rest of the year, when it's they're camping in the second brush after the second tower in bottom lane when they're losing their inhibitor. Why are they there? It's so much harder to prepare for what Fnatic will do and how they adjust mid-series than I think it's going to be for Alliance, who, while they are extremely good, play much more straightforward. Even the Wolves dismantled their straightforward style, and the Wolves at that time are the last place team.
Plus, I think touching on what Optimus Tom was talking about, I think the last time you were here, Fnatic is a proven, solid, in fact, even thrives on that series aspect. When they have to go best of 3, best of 5, they do even better than they normally would just on a one-off. Alliance doesn't have that track record. They just haven't had much of an opportunity to build it.
So the answer to the question then, from I'm assuming
Plus,
the three
plus,
of
plus,
you,
plus,
is
plus.
Fnatic.
Last time Fnatic went to Worlds, they did not have Reckless.
Okay.
No, they had Push You, and Push You is also awesome.
He did pretty well.
But Reckless is a superstar.
Reckless is a carry, and Push You was really good at the let's move around into Fnatic team fighty 3-man hit squad things. Reckless is you guys do that for the first 10 minutes, and then I'll kill everybody.
Wasn't he
Which
an
is
Ashe?
also good.
He played Ashe almost constantly. Didn't
Zyra, he played
Oh no,
Varus.
it was the arrows. It was more supporty kind of AD carries.
Yeah. Whereas Reckless plays Twitch and Vayne and gets all the kills and ruins people's fantasy weeks.
Yeah, he's
Or
double lifting you.
opponents' fantasy weeks.
Sounds like somebody's bitter about his fantasy week over there.
I won in our league, but I lost in another league at work, so I'm a little bit bitter.
Wow, hugs.
I did okay.
So yeah, I'm feeling good about Fnatic. Alliance will probably rally before playoffs. I hope they do, because I hope we have 2 good representatives for Europe. But I think the way Fnatic dispatched SK and Super Hot Crew so easily and just with so much authority and efficiency, they're looking really good. And I think if they can just keep their confidence up, keep their discipline up, I could easily see them, if not taking the split, definitely going to Worlds and putting on a good show.
Well, if they keep top two, they get that first round bye, which will be really big because it means you just have to win one series to get into Worlds, assuming that it's still the three slots. And next week, I don't know if you guys have checked this yet, but Fnatic gets to play the bottom two teams. So they're good. I mean, they can keep it up. They can go for an 8-0 run, and it's probably likely going to happen. And if they get to that 2-0, and if Alliance can beat Gambit and Super Hot Crew, then I mean they're gonna distance
Was
themselves
that
so much.
like it's questionable or
It's gonna
like
be
it's gonna happen?
It's gonna be one that I won't be watching. But they can just if they both distance themselves from the rest of the pack, it's gonna be just a madhouse for the 3rd through 6th slot, and no one's gonna have a shot at getting the top two otherwise because we've almost got the playoff set, like the 6 teams that'll be going set, and I think it's going to go down to the wire for 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, but 1st and 2nd are pretty much. I think they're going to be locked up soon.
So speaking of those middle sets, we have SK Gaming, Super Hot Crew, and Rockcat. You kind of have doing really shitty, doing okay, and kind of hit or miss, and then on a 5-game winning streak, Rockcat.
I love me some Rocket.
Rockcat's interesting because if you listen to the post-game interview after their win against Alliance, who was that they interviewed? I don't think it was Overpow.
Vander, I think. They interviewed Zazis once and Vander once.
It might have been Vander. They did not sound confident in their win at all. They were like, yeah, we managed to beat Alliance, which is great.
They threw a Baron
they almost
and
threw
almost
him,
lost the game.
But it doesn't sound like just as a team that's been winning 5 in a row that they're taking anything for granted, which I think is a great position for a team to be in. Given all things with Alliance and Fnatic in their performance, do you think that there is any kind of chance that any of those 3 teams, SK, who's been on the downturn, Super Hot Crew, who's kind of winning and losing games here and there, and Rockcat, who's been hot recently, do you think any of those teams have a chance to make it out into Worlds?
Oh, yeah.
Well, one of them has to, or maybe Millennium.
Is it 3?
Well, there's also Millennium.
It's 2.
Millennium is also tied with Rocket and 1 game behind SK and Super Hot Crew.
Well, there we
That's
go.
why it's a
Didn't see
madhouse.
that.
They're both tied. There's 2 sets of ties and 1 game separating those.
I think the hardest part is you kind of have to look at it a little bit differently. Like with SK, you like the clear-cut answer when you ask a regular watcher of the LCS is going to be SK will step it up, which part of me wants to believe, but at the same time, it's so difficult when you look at their in-game performances. It's not the fact that they're making absolutely terrible calls. It's not the fact that they're not as strong in the mid to late game as they were before. Their weakness in the early game is completely exposed and is a lot bigger. Now that once we talked about before, Rocket prioritizing early dragons and fighting for things again. Curse in North America losing out the fact that they don't contest those dragons either. SK's weakest part of their game is the first 15 minutes. And that is where things are starting to get decided now. You take an early dragon, the next dragon comes up, even sometimes before the 11-minute mark. And then once you hit the 15-minute mark, all of a sudden that's the 3rd dragon of the game. If Sven Skaren, the jungler, isn't doing things for his lanes, Freddy and Jesus, the farm bots of SK Gaming, are content to sit in those lanes and not do anything, which means that the focus is so heavy on that bottom lane. When Candy Panda's playing things like Ashe and Kog'Maw and Caitlyn and things that need to get to the late game, and they are being focused down, and there is nothing the rest of the team is doing in the early game, you have to look at SK and be like, all right, did they not adapt to the last couple of patches, whereas all the other teams looks like they have been?
Yeah, I mean, I could see them easily being that 3rd team, but yeah, you're right. They haven't really adapted, and that showed in their 0-2 week this week. Yeah. But I mean, they're not far behind. I think that battle for 3rd is going to be just insane once the playoffs get started. I think NA seems a little bit like it's taking form a little bit more because it's only about 5 teams in contention, but that's not really even saying that much.
Okay. Well, before we move on to the North American side, because time is not on ours, any final thoughts on Europe? What games are we going to be watching next week in particular?
Well, I have to say really quickly, if you guys didn't go and watch the Roccat versus was it the Millennium versus Alliance game that we touched upon before? I would go back and watch that one because it was pretty exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other games from last week to go watch and review?
If you like seeing people die a lot, watch the Copenhagen Wolves against Millennium, because that game did not stop having deaths until the game ended. It wasn't the best mechanically executed game by a long shot, but it was a very entertaining game.
Great. And next week, what games are you watching?
There's not that crazy of ones. See if Rocket can keep going.
I say Rockat's games are pretty big, and I'm also going to be honing down on SK versus Millennium. Obviously, there's still a lot of games left, 8 games left in the season, and it's really weird to kind of say, like, this game is going to decide how the teams do. But, like, Millennium and SK are both at this point where they win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game. So when it comes down, especially to playoff time, like if these teams are in like 4th, 5th place, they'll play each other again. So that's kind of where I'm going with this logic. Whoever wins that game and shows that they're a little bit better prepared than the other team, I think will be at least looking to hurdle that person in the standings. Like quite literally, if Millennium wins, they tie SK. If SK wins, they start to break away from that cluster.
Mm-hmm. I'm keeping my eye on SK this week. I just think that they're on a downturn. They need to turn that around, and they've got the opportunity to do it with Millennium, who in theory they should be able to beat, and Copenhagen Wolves, who they really, really should beat. And if
with new players.
With new players. And if they can't do it against either of those teams, then they've got a really serious problem that they have very little time to fix. So let's take a boat across the ocean and go visit North America.
Choo-choo. Wait, that's not a boat. That's a train.
Yeah.
Steamboat,
maybe?
The CLG hype train.
Let me tell you about my experience with North America this week. So I sit down to the first game of the week for Complexity versus Curse. And I'm thinking to myself, I really don't care about this game. I'll start watching it. Bridget and I'm on my iPad playing a fantastic new MOBA for the iPad, by the way. I forget the name of it, but
League of Legends.
No, I'm gonna plug it next show because it's a great game and it's free. But I start watching the game, and then I pop my head up 60 minutes later, and I'm like, son of a bitch, this game is still on. What was the final time for Complexity versus Curse?
80-21 or something?
Yeah.
And that is, by my record at least, the longest LCS game ever played.
I think there was longest LCS game by far. I think the longest game in a North America EU before that was 72 minutes, which is CLG Dignitas Season 2 playoffs with the Poke Cup that somehow went 72 minutes. I think there is a Hong Kong Attitude game in the GPL that wound up going for 90 minutes.
Jesus.
But we don't necessarily talk about that.
The worst part about this game is it wasn't like the two teams were squaring off in like just really indecisive, like big clashing team fights. This was, we're going to kind of tap each other, run away. We're going to kind of tap each other, run away. Let's have this chaotic fight that spreads across the map. And then eventually there's like a solid minute of action at the end, and Complexity is able to move over Curse. I don't know about you guys, but this is nothing more but than just a fun data point. Like Complexity, great, you were able to keep your shit together and last in a game against a pretty low tier team. And Curse, with your addition of X-Special, you can't close out a game. You can't take any decisive move, and you just played defensively for 82 minutes. It was just mind-numbing to watch. Entertaining towards the end, hearing the crowd getting pissed and screaming for a fight like we're in high school. But just overall, blech, bad day A bad
Ki-
day for North America.
The fact that every single character on Complexity besides maybe Elise was outscaled by their counterpart on Curse and they still won was the biggest what the fuck factor for me.
There's
Scaling isn't everything.
There's two really random things that I'm finding out just from Reddit right now. Apparently, this is just from comments, but I think Rengar, who was Dominate, apparently sold. I think he bought a Wriggles at 72 minutes into the game, thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna have a ton of stacks because I've been playing a game for 72 minutes." But apparently, it caps at 29 stacks if you don't actually buy Wriggles. And doesn't stack past that point. So he ended up buying it, and it wasn't Flare at 72 minutes into the game. In addition to that, Quas didn't die in 80 minutes of game at all.
Jesus.
That's impressive.
I really wonder if his Guardian Angel got popped, though, because he did have a GA.
That's true. I don't know. I can't watch a game like that because it doesn't matter. Like the wins and losses for them, it's really not making a whole lot of movement. Curse had an opportunity to maybe do a little bit better, but they lost to Complexity and they lost to EG. They lost to the two bottom teams. I mean, they were able to pull great wins in Super Week, and then they just come out into the regular week and they're like, hey, how hard can we possibly fall? Let's do it. 80-minute game against Complexity, who can't close it out.
I really just want to have, I want you to time me, a 30-second rant about Curse. I actually got a tweet earlier this week from a fan who said that sometimes he finds it hard to listen to us because he's a Curse fan and he really wants them to do well and wants us to focus on what they do well.
I'm so sorry.
Random Twitter person who I forget your Twitter handle right now, which is why I call you random. But I have to call out Curse on the fact that this week they played 2 games of the North American LCS where they did nothing. They had no dragon contests. I think they had 1 or 2 dragons the whole LCS, the whole week of LCS, and they played for 80 minutes against Complexity. You know how many? There's 12 dragons that spawned in that time. How do you only get 2 of them? Not only that, but they had a Kog'Maw composition that they could not protect the Kog'Maw. They had a lot of poke. They had a lot of displacement, and they just never really wanted to fight against Complexity, whose main motto is kind of well, we might as well try to kill them. They were the masters of dirtling this week. They just sat around and really didn't do anything in the mid to late game, and they paid the price because of it. Curse just looked like they did not have a plan. Every single time something happened where it looked like they could go in for a fight, or it looked like they could catch with a Quas ultimate, or they looked like they could contest a dragon, they were just maybe not, and took a detour back to the fountain. I didn't understand what their game plan was this week. It was fantastic. They went 3-1 in Super Week, and they looked pretty good in some of those games. But even in some of those games, there were points in time where they just wandered around the map, and you can't do that. You do not win the game when you're not trying to. So I don't know what their game plan was this week. And that is my rant on Curse. I'm sorry if you're offended.
I like that, Mott, you pointed out that they lost to the 2 worst teams and beat all the good teams last week.
Right.
So they're reverse TSM, including your hate for them.
They're Cloud9. Cloud9 loses to all the bottom teams.
No, but TSM only beats the bottom teams.
Exactly. Well, except for this week.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's somebody out there who has Curse on their fantasy roster, and they get high points just because of the fact it was an 80. All right, I will dominate. Their jungler got 43 points this week.
Wow.
That was great because he was the only one doing things because he'd jump in and pick up assists. He had 29 points in an 80-minute game. I get more out of that in Froggen in a 20-minute surrender.
So, just to put that in perspective, by the way, though, Soaz this week for me got 33 points. Serial, you have Yellow Star Fnatic support.
Yeah,
You got
46.
42 points. What the fuck is that?
Yellow Star?
It's called they win games.
It's called Yellow Star's a god, but we're on
not.
NA now.
Anyway.
Yeah. Let's
So I mean, overall, we could beat Curse to death, but at this point, they're so down there. I mean, it's at this point, it's the pillow fight to see who gets immediately regulated.
I was so excited for Curse this week too. I picked up Dominate. I picked up the Curse team. I figured they're against two bad objective control teams. They'll completely ace this week, 2-0, easy peasy. And then they curse themselves. Oh, I was so excited. I wanted to talk about Curse doing well, especially after that tweet, but I had to completely go the opposite way. Let's talk about somebody who did good this week.
Hold on. Complexity, though, the other side to that coin. So it was a whatever game against Curse. I mean, for Complexity, a team who's really had problems ending games and kind of keeping organized and, having a plan and executing it. Overall, they held on really tightly to that game. And sure, they won. It was kind of a base race end. But then they went up against LMQ. And they rocked LMQ for like the first half of that game. That was fantastic. And I think, Mitch, before the show, you were even saying you stopped watching that game because you thought Complexity had it.
Well, they had a huge, what I remember, because I was kind of flipping back and forth between that and Evo, was they were up like 6,000, 7,000 gold, maybe like 20 or 30 minutes in the game. And I was like, all right, I know it's not over, but the fact that I checked and I was like, oh, so Complexity must be tied with Curse. Wait, what? They lost? And I guess that's that experience that LMQ's got.
I don't know. I'm excited for Complexity to get into relegation and win. And come in, hopefully, with maybe some better staff, maybe somebody who can keep them organized and somebody to step up as a shot caller and really help direct the path of the game. But what I've seen out of Complexity rather this week was really, really exciting to me.
I love that fact. And the fact of the matter is, I don't want to hate on the guy, but they need a more decisive jungler with a bigger champion pool than Kez. Kez in the past has tried to be a shot caller, but he's not necessarily on the same level. He's not the best shot caller, to be completely frank. And when you're on a team like Complexity, where you have some pretty strong voices in Prolly and Robert X. Lee, you need to be consistent and precise and clear in your calls. Otherwise, they're going to take priority over it. And Prolly's even said in interviews, and just this past week, we'll argue about stuff. And then, we try to come to a decision about it, but in the game, it comes down to who's going to be making that call. And if Kez isn't consistent with making those calls and his champion pool isn't the biggest, I think that's Complexity's biggest Achilles heel right now. People could say what they want about Westrice not having the mechanical skill one-on-one, but he does what he needs to do for the team and occasionally has his trooper blooper moments, which we all remember from a past Complexity team. But, I feel I'm on the same page. Complexity goes into relegation. They beat the team from the Challenger Series, and then they continue onward and potentially pull a Millennium, which would be great.
Have a good split.
So, wrapping up on time, because we are getting dangerously close to the hour mark. Not to say that we have to hit it exactly. I do want to give plenty of time to the top of the tier in NA.
There were so many good games, or at least so many top-tier teams playing other top-tier teams.
So, let me ask a question to start out in the beginning. And this is a question I don't have the answer to, so don't look to me like I have some sort of answer. I want you guys to formulate your own opinion here.
That means we have the answer, guys.
Are you a teacher now? Because that's what it sounds like.
So right now, as it stands, CLG, this is the order ranking. CLG, number 1, LMQ tied, TSM down 1 game, and C9 and Dig tied for, I guess, technically third or fourth. Is this CLG and the new guys of LMQ coming in and CLG just doing better and LMQ being a really great team? Or is this Cloud9 and TSM really just sucking hard and we're just seeing the effects of those being shifted down? Because at this point, I have the loyalty to the team that goes to Worlds. I'm rooting for Rene, and I'll sink my teeth into whatever team manages to pull themselves out of the split, and I'll be happy if they get one round in. But sending CLG, potentially LMQ, and maybe either TSM, Cloud9, or Dignitas right now, in all of their forms, hasn't sold me on success, and I am so undecided on CLG. So, that being said, getting back to the original question, is CLG's recent success that's put them fighting for first place a product of their own advancement, or is it a product of the failures of Cloud9 and TSM?
Yes and yes. So, on the one hand, for CLG, you've got a massive increase in the synergy between Afromoo and Doublelift. I think Afromoo has really come into his own, and the two of them are just hitting on all cylinders, and that has made pretty much the entire rest of CLG's game just tremendously easier. I think, but on the other hand, you've had Seraph come in. I don't think he's been much of an impact player at all. He represents what I think is probably their biggest weak link right now. And no pun intended, but Link is also not, I mean, he's not putting a game-breaking performance out every time he's out there. He's reliable. He's not something they have to worry about, but he's also not a Doublelift equivalent in the mid lane. So CLG has had some things going for them. I think more than anything, they've just made the most out of their strengths. On the other hand, Cloud9 not doing as great. TSM, I think those roster changes had not as much impact as they were hoping for, particularly Glebe.
Thank you.
And, well, hey, I've been saying it since he got on there, and I think Optimus Tom was all like, no, Glebe's going to be great. I was like, yeah, not really.
Hey,
So he hasn't had much to offer. So between all that and LMQ coming in, obviously we all knew they were going to be a strong team coming from China. They definitely did not disappoint. I think they're not as bulletproof and immortal as they first seemed to be in the first parts of the split, but they're still an extremely confident, strong team without a lot of weaknesses.
Well,
So all those factors coming together, I think that's sort of what you're seeing here. I'm with you. CLG hasn't convinced me. But at the same time, they're doing well enough in the parts of their team that need to do well enough that they're able to overcome the slightly more weaker C9 TSM combo.
I think parity's just increased a lot. I mean, you can see it just in the standings because looking back, I just checked real quick. CLG at this point last season was at 12-8, which is one game behind where they are now. But you had two just powerhouses in TSM and C9 that were way ahead. They took the standings by 4, 5 games, 6 games. That doesn't happen anymore. Suddenly everyone's kind of normalized a little bit. You have people, let's say, 2-game difference between first and fifth. So I like it a lot more. I think CLG's playing better. And I don't want to say that because they're 1 game better than last season, they're at this point, that's a huge deal. But they've been playing well against the competition that's presented to them. I don't know how.
They've been playing
I
well enough, I think, is the thing. They've been playing well enough.
I think your answer to my question then is that no, they're not really steps ahead of where they were last split.
No, I think they are. I think they are. It's that despite me saying that it's 1 game ahead, that's also in comparison to a split where at that point they were probably still 4 or 5 games out of second or first. And now the fact that they are in first and are winning in just dog fights of the standings, I like them. I think they're doing really well. It remains to be seen how they'll do in the international kind of play. I mean, we already talked that to death earlier with Alliance, but I like them. I think they're going to do well. I think LMQ will do well as in addition, assuming they make it to Worlds and we get to see them in international play.
I think another factor that we have to think about here is a lot of the bottom, or not bottom exactly, but the mid-tier teams of NA are having more upset victories against the top half than was the case last split. And I think that's adding a bit of more of an X factor to some of these things where you look at a Cloud9 and you look like they've lost against some of what you would consider the worst teams. You've had Dig come in here and be much more of a factor than they were the last time around.
Oh, yeah.
And if you compare, say, like Diggs wins in the last split to Diggs wins this split, they're doing a lot better. And those wins have to come off someone. And you're finding that they're coming off of teams that would be at the top spots in the previous split. I mean, where else are they going to go?
Well, there's no mid tier anymore. It doesn't exist in NA. There is the top tier of 5 teams and the 3 bottom.
Welcome to Europe, Les.
Yeah, no, that's no. If you looked at last split, it was TSM C9. Let's see here. I've got it up. CLG,
Literally everyone else, yeah.
Yeah, it was literally everyone else was in the middle, and then CLG was their own tier essentially because they finished way ahead of Dignitas. But that was already set. Now there's just 2 tiers because any of the top 5 teams right now could finish first or second, and I would not be surprised at all. There's 8 games to go and 2 games separating that. If Dignitas and C9 finish first, second, sure. I'm not surprised if you told me that now. But then there's that bottom tier where they're not. Curse, Complexity, EVG are not making it up there.
Does Dignitas's losses this week alarm anybody?
A little bit.
Me a little bit, yeah. I expected them to be fighting a lot harder, basically for where TSM is at right now. I think overall their team is stronger. I'm just surprised that it's not translating.
They lost to the 2 top teams.
I think Dignitas's losses this week, especially in the game against CLG, it kind of speaks to something with Dignitas, and it goes back to the original point about CLG as well, where I'm sold on the fact that CLG is better than they were last split and showing a marked improvement in gameplay, but are not the top team in NA that I would expect them to be at this point. And the game itself was Dignitas came into the game and they had a plan. They wanted to force a 2v2 with Lucian against Kog'Maw. They wanted to try to get that, and they went across the map to do so. But they didn't cover their tracks. They didn't ward properly at level 1. They didn't try to move around where areas that would not be warded. QtPie walked over 2 wards that CLG placed directly in the mid lane and at their own blue buff, which put them on the back foot because they weren't able to execute the game plan. It looked like they had practiced for that game. So Dignitas comes in with, this is how we want to play the game, and if that doesn't work, well, we're going to have to try something different and kind of wing it in the mid game. Whereas CLG came with the fact, okay, we want a lane swap. And when it looked like that they didn't go like, we want a lane swap and we're going to hope Dignitas doesn't move. It was, we want to lane swap and here is how we are going to get that. And then even after the 5-minute mark, when they swapped the lanes back, they had already adjusted to the fact that, hey, we got a dragon, double lift is ahead, we can be okay with this. So Dignitas's weaknesses, I feel like they prepare for the one game plan, and if it gets messed up, they don't exactly know how to respond to it. Whereas with CLG, their game plan in this game was, let's keep double lift safe and get to the late game with Kog'Maw, which is what a couple of teams have done either successfully or unsuccessfully. Previously, CLG was all about the Seraph's going to get tanky, we're going to get a big team fight, and we're going to control like the mid to late game. So they had kind of 2 different play styles. The way Dignitas approached it in this game was they had repeated ganks on Seraph, they tried to knock down the top tower, and then use that to fuel QtPie into the original plan. Whereas CLG was, we just really don't care about Seraph in this game plan anymore. So you could do that, and we're just going to execute our plan.
I mean, it helps that the Kog'Maw late game came in the mid game because of how far ahead Double Lift was. I think they put,
like 4 or 5 kills on him.
Yeah, about 4 kills on him in a couple minutes. And there was just no answer for that. And I would like to see what happens to CLG when a team comes in there and instead of like some kind of level 1 type game plan or here's how we're going to play out the first couple minutes, they just build a comp around killing Double Lift. Heavy on the assassins, heavy on the dives, or alternatively, heavy on the siege where they can sort of pin Double Lift to a specific area. And let's see how good CLG is when he's off the table, when he's shut down. Because so far, I don't see team, if they're trying it, they're not doing it successfully.
Well, let's look at the last time, not this week, but last time TSM played against CLG. Double Lift played Tristana, who is a very safe AD carry. And every single time Double Lift got hit by a hook, CLG lost that fight. So Double Lift gets caught out of position, Double Lift becomes a non-factor in this new old style of CLG where he's the main focus, they get shut down. Can they mix and match both strategies and have a balance in champion select? That's yet to be proven to me. But it's shown that they have. It seems to me that
if you want to beat them, you need to do 2 things. Shut Double Lift down and counter jungle Dexter to keep him not as impactful as he would be. If you can keep Dexter underfarmed, frustrate his ganks, and if you can take Double Lift out of the fights early, either by zoning him out or straight up killing him, they are all of a sudden nothing. Link is not adding enough to win team fights. Seraph is not adding enough to win team fights. And Aframu is great, but if there's no damage threat for him to set up kills with, all he is some light CC. So there's just not enough depth of threats in there, and I think teams have to take that approach a bit more seriously if they want to think about unseating CLG from where they're at.
The problem with it is that, first of all, if they can do that, it's where it's going to actually matter is in the tournament, the playoffs, and that's where it might make or break a difference. I don't see CLG being able to survive if that's really what's powering their team right now through Worlds. It just doesn't seem like a reality for me.
I don't know, because the way I look at it, I see that CLG, while they have individually mechanically skilled players, I feel like CLG's best strength is their preparation for the game. So in a best of X series, I think I would favor them just because of their game plan. But if you can shut down Double Lift or shut down Dexter, shutting down Double Lift probably a little bit easier just due to the nature of AD carries. I feel like that's the way you like. If you put the player on tilt, the game plan becomes secondary. But if they execute the game plan and you don't focus on one big factor of their team, then they will just go like, all right, well, this was our game plan. Clear calls, good plans. Let's go, team.
All right. Well, let's wrap up on that note then, getting late into the night here. Before we push off, any final thoughts on the North American scene? What games from this past week do you think were really impactful? And if somebody happened to miss them, what would you basically go back and watch? And please don't say Complexity versus Curse because you're wasting your time.
I mean, there were so many first place matches going on. You could really kind of take your pick. I don't know if I have a favorite one.
I would say go back and watch TSM and Cloud9 because it is actually really both of TSM's games. CLG versus TSM and TSM versus Cloud9 because you saw both, in my mind, and we didn't really talk about it this show, but you saw kind of both sides of the coin. I know, right? No TSM with me. It's unbelievable. You saw both sides of the coin for TSM and really sort of the challenges they face. Hashtag Bjergsen makes terrible plays.
I'd recommend the CLG TSM game. The Cloud9 TSM game was kind of TSM with a large lead, Cloud9 moving around the map, and TSM hesitating until they decided to just kill Cloud9 and then making bad calls and killing Cloud9 and winning the game.
Yeah.
I think next week probably has more interesting matches for me. I mean, you've got LNQ versus CLG. That's going to be awesome. And another one that I'm keeping my eye on is actually Cloud9 and Complexity. I want to see how that goes down. See if Cloud9 can actually make any kind of... Yeah, I mean, they've got to be able to do it eventually, right?
I'd say both of LMQ's games and both of Complexity's games. Because LMQ's got TSM CLG, Complexity has C9 TSM. And Complexity looks like they can hang with people right now. So after the LMQ game.
I mean, this week, in theory, is a pretty nice cakewalk for...
Dig
and for Cloud9 because they both kind of have almost mirrored schedules in terms of positioning, but I'm going to say Curse is going to be a big factor in pushing those people down a little bit further and making the struggle just a little bit harder, probably with more of a focus on Cloud9 because they've got a Complexity that's gaining confidence and that can push an advantage. They're getting there. They're getting better. And you've got Curse, who especially is going to come back and be probably wanting blood for his terrible team doing terrible.
Complexity is up 2-0 on Cloud9 right now.
Cloud9 hasn't beaten them yet.
The dream is real.
I also want to see Complexity versus TSM just for the sole fact as a stats nerd. I'm pretty sure with TSM, all of their losses are against the top teams, and they have yet to lose to Curse, Complexity, or EG. So Complexity could put 2 marks on the map here by owning a head-to-head against Cloud9 and being the first bottom 3 team to beat TSM. They win both of those matches. They also get 6th place in a playoff spot.
Just to recap, by the way, games to watch for next week, everything in North America. Because we just hit every single game. Said, that one's going to be really good.
Except EG's games.
No, because EG's playing CLG, and that's important. And EG's also playing Dignitas, and that's important.
I meant for. Okay, sure.
Yeah, EGCLG. Whose Korean is better?
They had that really nice video where the two of them went to Hollywood together, and they talk about how bad they felt about killing each other. Some borderline racism right there.
All right.
Yeah, and with that,
Let's end on racism.
yeah, ending on racism and not poorly timed Hurricane Katrina jokes. This has been the T-Force. That was last week. This has been the T-Force
Right.
LCS Rundown. My name is Mont Ganorum, joining you every Sunday night shortly after 9 p.m. Twitch.tv/T-Force Podcast. I have been joined this week by Optimus Tom,
Who thinks Rocket makes worlds?
Mitch, Cereal Box Turner.
I'll be casting VG finals tonight. If you guys want to come join in, I'll just post that in Twitch chat because obviously the podcasters aren't going to be listening. But you should look into it. I cast pretty often.
Definitely do that. And in the most